I don't think Agile is dead. I think Agile is alive and kicking, and that's why PMI is so interested in it and wanting to merge with Agile Alliance. Project management and agility can never be brought together in a sane way. Continuous and incremental are two key words within the Agile movement. There is no continuity or incrementality in project management. Now, some people will argue that you can build in an iterative mindset into a project management framework. I would argue that that's not possible. So what I'm trying to call on the Agile community is to actually take ownership. The software industry needs us, and they need us desperately.
Today, I'm talking to Vasco Duarte, and we have some interesting topics to cover. We talk language, we talk project management, we talk Agile, and the merger of Agile Alliance and PMI. Vasco Duarte, a co-founder of Agile Finland and host of the world's leading Agile podcast, the Scrum Master Toolbox, with over 10 million downloads, is a foremost voice in the Agile community. You probably know him either from the podcast or from the Agile summits that he organizes. He's the author of No Estimates, and he delivers impactful keynotes and drives sustainable, profitable Agile practices, transforming software development globally. We'll learn more about all of this. So with no further ado, hello everyone, I'm Maria, and welcome to the next episode of the Agile State of Mind podcast. Let's go. Welcome, Vasco. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Maria. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. We are both very excited because we already had the conversation on Vasco's podcast. It's the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And Vasco's is the biggest podcast of Agile world, I would say, with over 10 million downloads. You probably stumbled upon it once in your life already. And just to say a little bit who Vasco is, he says on his LinkedIn that he's a product manager, he's Scrum Master, project manager, director, Agile coach, and only some of the roles that he has had in his life. And he's been in the community for a long time because you have been a developer, I imagine.
I started as a developer, indeed.
Yeah, okay, so you're a technical Agile coach. And then, apart from all of this, Vasco is also a creator and organizer of many Agile summits online and soon also offline. I don't know if you had already created something offline, but my first ever experience with an online summit, an online conference was with Vasco. And I remember that until today because you asked me at some point to do it in Spanish. And I was like, well, I work in Spanish, so why not? And I remember my Spanish friends were like, what happened to your Spanish? You suddenly couldn't speak any Spanish anymore. I invited, of course, all my friends, like, join online, you have to join. And then they were like, this wasn't Spanish, Maria. What did you do? But yeah, thanks to you, I started my journey with public speaking. And really, I don't know if you are aware, so wanted to just give you the thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome and congratulations. It takes courage and effort to start that journey.
Exactly. And talking about language, right, that we will be talking today, I just wanted to mention that because, I'm Polish and you are Portuguese and you live in Finland, I live in Spain, so we just mess it all up. And we will talk about this a bit. But before that, I am very curious, how did you come by organizing so many Agile summits and how is that working for you? I think to me it sounds so stressful and so hectic. I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So my first conference was organized in 2008. I was a co-founder of Agile Finland, a local Agile community association, and we organized the first, we called it Scan Agile, the first Scan Agile in 2008. Mm-hmm. So that was the first one that I organized. I've organized meetups since then. And then in 2017, Tom Hendrickson started organizing the Agile Online Summit. And I partnered with him Eventually, after a few years, he stopped doing that. So I continued, and the rest is history. So I've been organizing conferences in person and then later online since 2008.
Wow, that's such a long time. So you're just a pro in organizing conferences. If anyone needs to organize a conference, here's your person. But what is the next conference that you're organizing? Tell us about it.
So in May 2025, we will have the next in-person conference, and it will only be in person. So you must travel to Tallinn, Estonia,
That's a great destination.
to be part of that. It's a beautiful city. I mean, it's a medieval city. It used to be a huge trading outpost of the Schwarzkopf Hanseatic League, and eventually became such a big threat to the East Empire, also known as Russia, that Russia invaded Finland and founded Helsinki as a direct competitor to Tallinn in terms of trade. Tallinn really was the gate to the East back then. It's a extremely beautiful medieval city, worth visiting just for the touristic aspects. But of course, if you're going to a conference, it's great to, put the two together.
And I love that. One of my goals for life now is to join those agile work that I do with visiting and traveling. I consider it one of the greatest mergers. So we will talk about another merger just in a moment.
Maybe not so great merger.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit what's the topic of the conference. Is there like a theme?
Absolutely. So this year, we're organizing the conference around first-person, real-life stories of Agile succeeding that inspire you to action. It really is about helping you connect with the community. We're all fed up with the infighting and name-calling that is going on in social media. That's not what happens when we do face-to-face events. It's a lot more collaborative. And we want to inspire you to take action, to have an impact in the organization where you are. And we do that through sharing real life stories. We have some amazing stories to share of the confirmed speakers. We are still finalizing the program, but there's already quite a lot of amazing stories confirmed that are coming out on social media. So just pay attention and you will see the announcements coming.
Great. And I think that's precisely what we need, especially given the death of Agile. The Scrum is ending. It's like I have it in my mind so much that I always say the same thing, but that's what we are facing right now. And I would love to see more of those examples of success. I don't know if you know, when I was on Agile 2024 last year in Dallas, in Texas, John Kern shared that he's one of the signatories of Agile Manifesto. And he shared that he's precisely doing that. He's compiling the stories and the exemplars of how Agile succeeds. I think you should maybe talk because he's doing that. He has this initiative of reimagining Agile, and I think that could really go together. So, and then I'm happy to see those initiatives popping up, like that's the United States. Here we have it in Eastern Europe, and I'm very happy because, I'm from Poland and Estonia is very close to my heart. I've never been, so I really considering going. So great. So from here, I would like we talk about this merger and what happened with Agile. So precisely that this Agile is dead, and we heard about it so much. And suddenly we got the news that Agile Alliance is joining PMI, and now we have just one PMI with Agile, or however you would call it. And we talked briefly about it before. So I would like to hear what you think about it, because I tend to have this, this pink glasses. I view life from the bright side, and I always think like, well, that's the end of the war. We don't have to call names. We are already one. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm reminded of this idea. I don't know who said it, but there's this phrase that sometimes comes up that goes like this. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Now, from that perspective, I guess we could say, hey, PMI lost, Agile Alliance won. But I'm not so sure. Just a little bit of history. So the PMI launched their first Agile certification in 2011. So that's 14 years ago. So obviously the PMI is not late to the party. They have been, so to speak, in the party for quite a while. There are many good reasons why that PMI-based Agile certification wasn't the winner in the market, right? But I think that at some point, maybe even recently, the PMI realized that Agile was eating its lunch. It still is, by the way. That's not going to change with the merger. But there's the old idea the cyborg will embrace and extend, right? That's the Microsoft strategy for all business challenges. And I think that PMI is just copying a line from Microsoft's strategy book and embracing and extending. And I think we will see, unfortunately, a watering down and eventual elimination of Agile by the PMI. Now, not in reality, but in terminology, right? And we'll talk about language in a second. I'll explain why I believe this is going to happen, but that's what I believe will happen. The PMI will slowly but surely eliminate all agility from the Agile Alliance's communication and language, only using the label Agile to basically rebrand what the PMI is selling, which is the good old school project management, linear thinking, which of course many people prefer, and who am I to say that they shouldn't, but definitely isn't what Agile is. Lucky for us, and we'll talk more about that as well, practitioners are not stupid, and they don't stop. And events like the Global Agile Summit or other Agile conferences that are happening around the world will keep that idea alive. The danger that I see, though, is that I don't think Agile is dead. I think Agile is alive and kicking, and that's why PMI is so interested in it and wanting to merge with Agile Alliance. PMI strategists, I'm sure, look at Agile as a threat to their business model, and they want to take over it so that they can say, hey, we're Agile, just copy us. And I don't think they are Agile, and I think that project management and agility can never be brought together in a sane way. I'll explain why as we go through the conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but it's a bit of, to me, it sounds like there's this monster, and monster is eating the cookie, and then monster makes the cookie how he wants it. I think there is also this other player. So Agile Alliance also agreed to it. It wasn't a hostile takeover. So, and I also had my thoughts about it, because I thought, okay, we are talking so much about the end of Agile. And when I was at that conference, that is created by Agile Alliance, there were so many talks about the crisis, the Agile identity crisis, that you could see elephant is being acknowledged. It's not just in the room and we are pretending we don't see it. And then they decided to take this step because they probably saw that it's a turning point. And I don't know as well, was it because they thought, okay, we are finishing, it's the end, and it's better to just merge now than to just disappear slowly, which is like my worst case scenario. My better case scenario is to think that Agile will be there, there's no turning back. Of course, we will probably water a bit what we consider Agile, but have you ever seen like a really totally fully Agile implementation in a whole organization? I saw it maybe once from all the organizations I worked with. Usually it's always this collaboration, this trying to make the two somehow survive, because you will always have people that they have an Agile mindset and they understand it, they get it, they are all for collaboration. And you always have these other people that are like, I need some control. I need to know what's going on. I need a report. I need this to be like this illusion of control, because we never have that control. We only think we have it, right? And I think that maybe instead of trying to force people to like, no, now you collaborate, don't have control. We just acknowledge, okay, there is this part of us that's project managing and controlling, and there is this other part that can be agile, and within the boundaries, it will never be perfect. So I see it as like, we live together like flatmates. We are different, have our differences, but we might not fight every day. We might also appreciate the differences we have.
Well, I think that's a perfectly reasonable perspective if we assume that the people doing the business never really have to interact with the people writing the code, right? If we never really have to interact other than getting a project approved and having some escalations every now and then, I think that works perfectly fine. Unfortunately, businesses don't really follow that, let's say, storyline for long, because businesses that ignore the way software is developed eventually create huge problems for themselves and will either go bankrupt or lose the market or whatever. One of the things that we are seeing in our industry, software industry that is that there are companies that were born in the software world, right? They were born when software was already the normal thing. And, one of them is the company where you work at, as an example, but others would be Google or Meta or other companies like that. Microsoft, not so much. We might get to that in a second. But those companies that were born in the software era are managed and led by software people. They were organized and created by software people, and the people who work in them are mostly, not all, software people. Those companies have a chance of understanding how to connect what is an inadequate framework like project management to other more adequate frameworks like Kanban or Scrum, and somehow do a mashup of those. And there are many ways to do that mashup. I have an interview on the podcast with Marit Lante and Rami Sirkia where they talk about lean and agile financial planning. One of the key aspects of project management is how we make decisions on to starting a project and funding a project, right? When fund a project, typically what happens is you have a set of scope that is predefined up front and you give it a price. People decide whether that's a good enough price or not. And then if it is, they fund it. If it's not, they send it back and get a new set of requirements, or they just say no. Okay. Now, this is the start-stop funding. Software is never done like this, except the first time we do it, right? If we're doing software for the first time, you need that kind of decisions. But if what we're doing is developing a product over a long period of time, what we need is continuous and incremental funding. Continuous and incremental are two key words within the Agile movement. There is no continuity or incrementality in project management. Now, some people will argue that you can build in an iterative mindset into a project management framework. I would argue that that's not possible. And let me offer a reason for that. In the 1920s, Edward Sapir, he was a linguist and anthropologist, observed that different languages characterize experiences in unique ways. So he proposed language influences how people understand reality. A student of his, a decade later, Benjamin Lee Whorf, this is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, expanded this idea. He studied Native American languages, like Hopi, which is a Native American language. I don't know that language, but he studied it and argued that their grammar and vocabulary shape their speakers' worldview different than, say, English speakers. For example, they have the concept of present, not future and past, right? When you think about looking at the world without the concept of future and past, you immediately understand that you would see the world differently. For example, there is no history in a language where there is no future and past. There's only present experience. Now, in project management, we have a focus on predictability. In Agile, we have a focus on responding to change. And just take these two aspects. When you make decisions based on the concept and the goal of predictability, you are necessarily going to make different decisions and organize teams differently and measure them differently than if you focus on responding to change. This is just one example. But I think it is a clear example of how the project management framework and its language prevents agility even from getting started, because the very essential concepts within the project management framework go against the very essential concepts of Agile. In this case, predictability versus responding to change.
But do you think it's very interesting? I think also for us, we are using many languages in our everyday life, right? So we notice how some concepts cannot be even translated. And sometimes you might be saying something translated directly from one language in another and it doesn't make any sense and nobody understands what you want to say. So I get that. But then I have this feeling when it comes to the project management and Agile, I think we are already past the point of being so strictly divided. And I feel like this is also the English I'm speaking. My English is a mix of some Polish expressions, some, Spanish expressions. It will never be clean. It will never be. And I still hear Americans speak and I still like what they want to say. I have no idea what that phrase is. I've never heard it. I only know my English from school, So it will never be like perfect for me. And I think the same goes for that. Like even if I am in a very project management-y environment, they know of Agile. They heard of responding to change and they will throw that on at you from the point when it is sometimes more convenient for them, not necessarily from the good place where like, oh yeah, So I want you to be predictable, but of course we respond to change. So we have to be agile when there is a change in requirements, right?
Yeah, basically, you can do exactly what I tell you, unless when you do something else, it saves my neck. That's what project management is telling us, right? Like, follow my plan exactly, unless there's a big problem, and then you can be agile, but only to follow my plan. And this creates a really serious conflict in people's mind. Let me share an example with you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century developed this idea of a panopticon. A panopticon is a prison design where the watcher is in the center and the prisoners are in the periphery. There are lights going from the center to the periphery, which means that the watchman always watch the prisoner never sees the watchman. Foucault developed this idea further and included it in the concept of language. He used this panopticon, right? You're always being watched. Big Brother from 1984. So he used this panopticon as a metaphor for how society is structured. This panopticon is the concept of self-surveillance, because after a while, when the prisoners need to follow certain rules and the guard are watching them, but they never know when the guard is watching them, because the guard could be watching somebody else, right? So the prisoner needs to internalize the rules. The rules need to become part of who the prisoner is, and after a while, that was the theory, the prisoner would follow the rules even if the guard wasn't watching. And we know this is true because this concept was studied and developed further, and it is even used today. I'll give you a concrete example from project management. In project management, there's this concept of plan versus actuals. They use terminology like baseline adherence, so how close are you to the original plan? They use terms like variance reporting, and this creates a culture of fear, right? Like imagine, Maria, that you get called on by your project management and he asks for your variance report. So in the PMI's language, this plan versus actuals isn't just a metric. It's a panoptic mechanism. It is designed to make you feel that you're being watched all the time so that you internalize, you create this self-surveillance that leads you to follow the plan even when you know you shouldn't be following the plan, because otherwise you need to do a variance report and maybe get called to explain yourself at the change control board. These are all terms from project management. Agile strength is in creating the ability and the permission to adapt. PMI and the language around project management is taking that away because it already brings with it this concept of plan versus actuals. And plan versus actuals is how, for example, we assess the quality of estimates. So if the estimates are wrong, we are still blaming you for it because you didn't follow the plan.
Well, that is very deep, I have to say. And at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, this is so much philosophy. But when you touch the subject of how we feel we are being watched and how many times I felt that is the case, and you never know. You never know. And you are asked like this moments, like it's some random moments of an update of what's going on. You are asked some strange questions from time to time, and you think, do they know something I don't know? That is, there is this presence of fear for sure. And it's actually very interesting that you mentioned that, because we had this conversation not so long ago that we notice people are getting very serious suddenly. You used to be able to joke around and make jokes and just have fun on those big meetings at the office. And kind of the culture, not only at the company, but in the countries, is changing to this culture of, oh, I better not say this because who knows what's going to happen. And I think when I think about it, one thing is what you mentioned, but that has been there forever. It's not a new concept. But there is also the many layoffs that have happened in the recent years. They only show you that your work is not so, like, you have been working for years and years in the same company, and suddenly it's like, well, that might not be the case anymore, right? Because we cannot hear anymore about more layoffs coming from the big tech, from many companies all over the world. And you think like, now it's not the best time to change. Like we used to change jobs all the time because why not? You know, you probably get a bigger salary. You maybe have a better, interesting, more satisfying project to work on. But right now it's like, if you change, you will be the first one in line for the next layoff round, right? So I think we are living, maybe that's why this fear is now even bigger and people are more wary of this. But it is something that we notice as well. You don't have so much fun on those chats when you have a big old hands as we used to, because people are just not so sure and
just
secure.
Put that current historical context, so being afraid of being laid off, together with the idea from project management, plan versus actuals, you get the perfect storm of this self-surveillance, which will prevent, in reality, us from using agile approaches, right? So when you're asked the next time, hey, you should adapt the plan because we have new information, then the next thing you need to ask is, who's asking me? Is it the project manager that is asking me to adapt the plan and maybe they take the responsibility? Or is it just my colleague who needs something from me and now I need to change my plan to serve them? But then the project management will come and hit me in the head with a variance report and a call out to the change control board. Like all of this language is bringing us back to the concept of somebody else decides, we execute. And this was the fundamental change that Agile brought to the software world, which is that the decisions need to be made in the front line, right? Like the people who need to do the work need to be the ones making the decisions. This is why we talk about self-organization in Scrum. This is why we talk about teams doing their own retrospectives, not project managers doing the post-mortems after the project is over, right? And this is going away. With project management as a framework, this is going away because project management starts from the perspective that somebody else plans and you execute what they planned for you, right? And for me, the merger between PMI and Agile Alliance is just a call for our community, the software community, to continue on this journey of adopting Agile in its full impact by, for example, creating a language. You know, we already have Scrum and Safe and Less and Nexus and so on, creating our own language to talk about how we deliver software. And it ain't projects, because if it were projects, we would be back to the old language concepts of planned versus actual, variance reports. Risk management in Agile is a totally different thing from risk management in project management, right? Like in project management, you have a rich risk registry. In Agile, you have, hey, let's get together and solve this immediately, or let's run a prototype because we see a risk coming up. This is a totally different perspective on the same word, which gets us to the next concept, which is very interesting. So Saussure in the early 1900s observed that the word, let's say risk, and its meaning, the relationship between these two things is completely arbitrary. I'll give you a concrete example. So for us in Agile, risk is something to be immediately tackled, and Agile itself is organized around the idea of eliminating certain classes of risk. For example, the risk of what, right? Delivering the wrong thing is tackled by having customer feedback early and often. It's right there in the Agile Manifesto. While in project management, the risk of what is not tackled there. It is tackled much further upstream. Somebody designs a strategy for a product, and they are the ones tackling the risk of what, not the team. The team is not supposed to consider customer feedback. Now, of course, many people will say, oh, come on, Vasco, that's just extreme. Of course, they will consider customer feedback, not if they want to follow the plan. But people will not really follow the plan, right? Well, they will if they are measured on plans versus actuals and punished by not adhering to the original estimates, and so on and so forth. And the conversation just goes. So the way we call and treat risk in Agile teams is completely, fundamentally different from the way project managers call and treat risk in the project management framework. And Saussure's insight here is extremely important because in Agile teams, we attributed to risk a completely different meaning and a set of actions and perspectives than what project management did. And this is why project management and Agile can never be brought together in a sane way. There is no team in the world who is doing Agile who wants to have a risk registry. No, they want to do quick checks like paper prototypes, customer interviews. That's what they want to do. Project managers, they want to have a risk registry, and you need to report on that every iteration.
Thank you for explaining this to me, because when I first came upon working on the risks and now we have to roam the risks, now we have to gather the risk management was kind of like huge job of this project manager. And I was like, what is this? I never could understand why I don't like it and why I never used it. And we survived when I was doing really the iterative approach of Agile with the teams and a very collaborative way of working, and you doing the user story mapping and including the developers in what they will be working and how they will implement it, right? So I thank you for this. It's really interesting because I was like, something is wrong here, but I can't find the moment of this is wrong here.
So I have one extra thing to share. So this is from the, let's give a little bit of historical context. In the early 2000s, we were just starting to adopt Agile. And of course, project management was the ruling framework, the most popular framework for managing software development. And one of the people that was talking about this was Barry Beam. Okay, I can't show the screen right now, but I'll talk it through. So Barry Beam was, and it still is, a very well-regarded software development specialist. He's the famous person behind the cone of uncertainty, which is, by the way, fake news, and it never really happened, and we already have the data for it, but people still think that the cone of uncertainty is a real thing. Anyway, but Barry Beam was still very well-regarded in software development circles, and still is. And he wrote a book together with Richard Turner in the early 2000s called Balancing, kind of trying to find an equilibrium between balancing agility and discipline. What he was implying in the title of that book, of course, is that agility equals chaos. Now, you and I know, because we've been doing Agile for a while, that it's very easy to be chaotic in a project management framework because you have this whole structure around you that is keeping you on target and measuring everything and controlling everything you do. To be Agile, you need to be extremely disciplined. In fact, the only way to be successful with Agile is to have extreme discipline in how we execute our work. But here we are in the early 2000s, and the proponents of a project management-like approach were calling agility chaotic. language has an important meaning in how we see the world. Now, you and I are both Agile practitioners, and maybe many of our viewers and listeners are probably also Agile practitioners. So we already know how important discipline is for successful Agile teams. But the project management people, they think we are chaotic. They think we are unresponsive. They think we don't follow any plans and are not accountable. This is the language that we have to deal with, right? So what I'm trying to call on the Agile community is to actually take ownership. The software industry needs us, and they need us desperately, because if we go through another wave of project management frameworks for software development, we are going to have another wave of slow, cumbersome, bug-ridden, completely unpredictable software deliveries, as we see, by the way, in the Nordic countries. I mean, just Google for software project disasters in the Nordic countries, and you will find many. And I'm talking about like huge disasters. We're talking about, billions of euros wasted on software projects. No Agile team would ever do that, because we can't. We go 2 weeks and we already know where we are. When we find a problem, we tackle it immediately, right? Project management does not work like that. Fundamentally, Agile software development is, in my opinion, incompatible with a project management framework. And the language tells us that. We talk about different things, we value different things, and that's important for us to recognize.
I understand what you're saying. I still have this view more like, I don't think it's such a deliberate action. I prefer not to view it as that. I believe it's lack of understanding. It's not being prepared. It's being thrown into some Agile framework because somebody, the leadership just read a book, and now your role is no longer project manager. You're now a Scrum Master. You have no clue what that means. And especially that happens with the product managers or project managers who are thrown to be product managers or product owners. They have no clue. They have no help from whatsoever, because we have huge help from Scrum Masters and Agile coaches and community as the coaches. But when it comes to especially the products people, they don't have such a help, right? So I think I really try to see it as there are these two words, two different languages that we use, but most of the conflicts or my misunderstandings happen just because of ignorance, or this need. For me, it's very visual in Canva. Like when you think about what's intuitively good, like I will start this and this and this at the same time, it will all be faster. That's what you think directly to do. And then when you study and when you check your flow metrics, you see that paralyzing work is not the best way to finish something and in quality. You probably need to focus on one, finish it, and then you focus on the second and you finish it. And then you have something done before getting crazy and chaotic and so on. So that's why I think many of those intuitive ways of working are not really great. And this really takes discipline, as you say. Like, it's so fun to start. I get so much dopamine when I start a new one and another one. And then you're like, no, focus on finishing. It's not so fun when you're at the end, but just do it, right? So I want to finish our chat with some like hope and on a positive note. So what I'm seeing is I see you fighting very hard on the front of we need Agile and we are the ones that can make it happen, right? It's not somebody else. It's not the people there. It's us. We are on the front line. We are doing our job and let's just keep doing it. I also see you keep doing all those initiatives. You have your podcast. You are creating such amazing summits online and in person. And that means that you have a lot of faith and hope for that. So I really hope that succeeds. And I see that it's in our hands. So this is something that you feel you have the ownership. We have the ownership. We have the responsibility to just keep doing our job. What do you think?
Absolutely. And what you said is very important. We have the responsibility. That's why there is hope. We are the software industry. We are going to make it in an agile way. We are going to bring agile to software. This is very important, what you just said. And this also means the transformation starts with me. I need to find my tribe. I need to find the people who can help me, who can motivate me, who can inspire me, like you in the work that you are doing as a creator as well. And I need to take ownership of bringing Agile to my company. It's not going to be PMI. It's not going to be Agile Alliance. The Agile community, the software community, needs new leaders. The people who were behind the Agile Alliance are no longer our leaders. Maybe they were never our leaders. Who knows? But they no longer are. We need new leaders. It's you, it's me, it's the people that are coming to the Global Agile Summit. It's the people who take action every day, who want to make sure that the software that we're doing is a productive contribution to society, not another burden. And project management does not have the answer for that. It never has, never will. We in the Agile community have. Whatever we find next, it's going to be a progress from here, not going back to project management.
I agree. And one important thing that I find that we haven't mentioned is also the quality of life. What's your quality of life when you are surrounded by collaborative people, where you have the psychological safety to do something, fail, and okay, let's move on, let's learn the lesson, and let's try the next thing. And how different is this quality of life when you work and you don't really like your work? You just are there. You feel everybody's like an alien. Nobody talks to each other. People are afraid and the fear prevails. And I think that's, for me at least, the biggest motivation to make the world a bit better through us spending so much time at work. Let's enjoy it. Let's have fun and let's feel that we are contributing to something bigger and that makes sense, and not just fulfilling orders from the set of soldiers. Right?
Absolutely. Well said.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your very deep and thought-provoking thoughts. I think this kind of going into philosophy can really be fun as well and interesting, and can show us so much about the hidden ways that we might not even realize, like just the language and the words we use. So that's very interesting, and I think it's a good food for thought for all of us. And let's see, maybe we can see each other in May in Tallinn and have more conversations about this.
Looking forward to it, Maria.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.